Hey everybody, welcome to Web Components in Space, episode 4. I am excited today because we have a guest. I have burned my thrusters and we're orbiting now over Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to introduce Cassondra Roberts. And first, I want to do a name check as well because I don't know many Cassandras, but I feel like you spell your name with an O. And so am I supposed to do the long Cassandra or is it just Cassandra?
Cassandra is perfect. Yeah, I get that a lot living in the South. There's a lot of Cassandras out here, but my parents are from up north, and so they went with the Andra.
Okay. So, okay, gotcha. Cool. So I know you're somewhere around the Triangle area, and I know I can call it confidently the Triangle area because I used to live there. It was an awesome place to live. And I remember the Tobacco District. It was just getting kind of started, the tech scene there. What's it like now? Is it still thriving? Is it a cool place to be if you're in web development like we are?
Yeah, it is. It is a very exciting place right now. So, one of the draws for the Triangle has always been the research, Triangle Park, and the number of colleges that we have in the area. They've all pretty much upped their tech game. So there's a lot of advanced degrees that you can now earn in the area focused on tech, and a lot of research that you can do. We've got campuses for IBM, Google is building one, Apple has come to the Triangle, or is coming, I think, recently. Big tech conference that is about open source, which I'm forgetting the name of at the moment. All things open.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
And they had a space theme a couple years ago, which was awesome.
Yay.
So it fits perfectly with your spaceship. Yeah. All Things Open is such a great tech conference.
I know you well for doing style. I feel like you're a very prominent voice in the web components community lately. And I feel like it's a lot related to style. How would you describe yourself?
Well, thank you. I'm flattered. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I came about the web, I guess I'll say honestly, in that, I wanted to make my MySpace page amazing when I was in high school. And so I started digging around CSS and kind of figuring my way out. And that set me up for a really great career in tech because it really taught me how to look to others for inspiration, how to find what works well in someone else's, system, and then take that piece and kind of integrate it into my own personal style and flair. And so that's kind of the energy that I bring. I do a little bit of everything. I do DevOps. I do web components. I love CSS. I'm actually honored to be on the CSS working group for the last couple of years. Nice. And then also kind of dipping my toe in like you mentioned, the web components spec community. Part of the web components community working group, highly recommend. It's open, so anyone can join if this is something you're passionate about. They talk a lot about, what's next for web components and where do we want it to go? Because really it's a community driven effort, and the browsers are really listening to what we have to say. So this is the time to speak up.
Let's talk about your book. You are writing a book on CSS style.
Yes, I'm trying.
No, isn't that the story? Like it's hard writing a book and you're writing it all yourself, right?
I am. I'm writing it myself. I have a 5 and a 3-year-old, full disclosure, so it's taking me probably 3 times as long as I would like. I've got the chunk of what the messaging is, like all the stuff that's in my head is written down. Yep. I'm just working at this time at building out the technical examples that kind of demonstrate these concepts, and then backing it all up with the citations from the specification that kind of drive that. And as I go, I've found, as we go into the spec, for those who haven't had the pleasure of doing this, I highly recommend if you just go read the spec, you learn a million things in the process. It's so interesting. One of the most common questions people always ask is about the font typography cascade into the shadow DOM, and they're like, why? It's encapsulated. Why does it cascade? Yep. And it's like, go read the spec. It's insanely detailed, like PhD level detailed about why typography cascades.
I had the
same. So I'll include that.
Okay, so actually you knew what you were getting into with that. When I was writing my book on web components, I saw this behavior and I was like, wait, what is going on? And I had to, I must have looked at the spec or something, because I'm like, oh, yeah, that's how that works. Cool. Um,
Yeah,
Now, oh, so are you self-publishing too, or are you going through a publisher?
it is my dream to find a publisher. I
Mhm.
do want to connect with a few developers before I get to that stage so that I can get some feedback on kind of the approaches and make sure that I've got the details right.
Yep.
Hoping to maybe connect with Leah. Leah Veru is a wonderful developer I work with in the CSS working group.
Cool.
I would say she is the foremost of styling web components. Like,
Mhm.
I learned a ton from her. So if I could get her perspective, that would be a dream. But
Yeah.
yeah, once I go through that, I would like to publish. Fingers crossed, putting it out into the world, like The Secret, like a book apart, maybe. Like,
Right
someone
on.
pick me up, that'd be great. But
We'll have to
we'll
shoot
see.
this link to them
Yeah.
once it's done, once we have this video.
Right.
So in terms of here's how I want to talk about your book. I want to come back to a project I'm working on for this episode, and it's a music-based project. It's a practice. You can practice your singing, or you can practice a MIDI keyboard. But I'm kind of putting it out in my own style, right? So I'm kind of building a tiny mini design system where I import some like CSS into my stuff. Like a button should look like this, so I'm importing CSS. Let's start there. Like, does that ever work well? Or do you have to just be careful?
Um, so this is funny. So in my own projects, I don't use design systems.
Okay.
I've done it in the past for like my personal site. What I find is that 9 times out of 10, I end up over engineering
Mhm.
and like could have finished it in half the time if I just write the raw code. And so I've been taking the effort, and it really is hard because it's painful, right? You're like,
Yep.
I could do this more efficiently. But at scale, it makes a lot of sense to be efficient
Yep.
for just like small applications. I actually now have gotten better about going like rough and dirty and just like
Yep.
writing out some nasty selectors and just getting those stuff
Yep.
out there. But yeah, I know I'm bad about my own projects.
Mhm.
I don't do a whole like systems thing, and I stopped using SAS a while ago. Like, I use SAS for most of my stuff at work, but
Mhm.
like I stopped doing it on my personal projects because I'm like, I just
Mhm.
no pre-processing.
Exactly, me too. It's always difficult having this conversation with people that like web components just make it easy, right? So you don't need
Mhm.
SaaS. And then you're talking to other people and they're like, obviously we're gonna have less in this project. Why wouldn't we?
So web components change a lot of the way we think about how we write styles, right? So for a little context, I came from kind of pre-web components design system work where we were building twig templates and using SAS and using a BEM methodology to kind of namespace and scope styles.
Mhm.
Um, Now, what we're finding with web components is that's not necessary. Right? That's a lot of overhead. You don't really need them inside a web component because your markup is minimal. Typically, your web components are fairly small. Granted, like, you could do an entire app inside a web component. There's nothing that limits the scope and scale of a web component. But
Mhm.
let's just assume, like, for this conversation, that your web components are somewhat molecule sized esque.
Mhm.
um, in that case, it really makes sense to just style the markup semantically, right? Like, why
Yep.
do I need to apply a class to something when I have a section tag or I have a nav tag or an a tag, right? I can just say, this is a link. I'm styling the links in this web component.
Yep.
And so that becomes a lot less necessary. Also, the fact that IDs are scoped inside of the shadow DOM
I
and
love
you
that.
don't have to worry about duplication, right? And
Mhm.
so it's so much easier to just assign your styles to an ID, which also, you can use in your JavaScript. So, for those listening who aren't aware, like, if you query on an ID, it's more efficient than querying on a class.
Mhm.
And so, when you have the option to, you do want to try and in your JavaScript query for the ID. And so why not just also style on it? Why have both?
Mhm.
So as far as that goes, like, that's how I try to write my CSS for web components. The attributes piece of it, I find, like, I try to use the existing global attributes where they are relevant,
Okay.
because I don't need to define like ARIA hidden already exists. I don't need to redefine that. There's also the hidden attribute, right? So like, I don't need to redefine that as an attribute. You can, and it can get tricky. So I highly recommend when you are defining your own attributes to represent state, do not use any of the global attributes that exist in HTML because you will override them in your web component and it will be confusing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, because you'll get the browser styles and then you're like, what's going on? Yeah.
You mentioning ID is like one of those things I love about using web components because, like you said, it's like scoped to inside your shadow DOM. Another like thing that is just like using IDs all over the page was bad practice before. Now it's cool. And so I think you called out using the important feature as well. Like I do,
yeah.
I've stayed away from that still just because it has bad voodoo for me. I don't know. So you use that.
It takes some time. And I think in my book, I even like go so far as to be like, all right, we need to get comfortable again with bang important. Like, let's be friends. I know that you've been taught from day one that like bang important is evil, never use it. With web components, especially if your library supports any kind of light DOM, get comfortable with bang important. When I was working on PFE at Red Hat, that library had a dependency on supporting light DOM fallbacks. So that way, if the JavaScript failed to load, because as an open source project and working at a company like Red Hat, there are a lot of users who do deactivate JavaScript. Not common, like globally. You know, the statistics for the entire internet are very different, but their particular user base is more like safety conscious servery kind of people, right? So we had to build with that understanding that sometimes JavaScript would be deactivated.
So we are getting short on time. I think I want to leave this with what is from your book, your upcoming book, what is the most pull your hair out thing that you've encountered using CSS and web components? Can you think of one?
There's a lot of inconsistencies between the browser implementations. This is getting better. So as I say this, like day by day, it's improving. But when you find those Safari bugs that are inconsistent, I have found it's very important to test between browsers. And I've actually, believe it or not, I've taken to doing my development in Safari because I am more likely to find the issues there, and it's more likely to work like with no problems in Firefox and Chrome. Although recently I did find something where Safari had implemented a feature that Chrome and Firefox had not, and it was like a weird edge case. And it's on my code pen if anyone wants to check it out. I actually like demoed it on the code pen. But yeah, I mean, so that browser inconsistency is really challenging because web components are still inconsistently implemented across browsers, especially when it comes to styles. Some of the like functionality in JavaScript, much more hardened in that respect. But slotted selectors, like how do you target something, you know, inside of a web component or inside the light DOM, like all of those pieces are really difficult to get exactly right. And a lot of times you just need to do a little trial and error to see like, okay, if I do this plus this, what does that look like? All right. I highly recommend hot pink, you know, just like styling things with hot pink or Rebecca purple, like pick your color and like, that's going to tell you, did that work? Nope, that did not work.
Cool. Well, I want to say goodbye, but thank you so much for coming on today. I'm looking forward to when your book comes out, but it sounds like we got to watch out for it. So we'll have to keep tabs on it. And
I will keep everyone informed. And hopefully my babies will give me some time coming up. They've been very active lately, but we've got Christmas vacation coming up and I'm hoping to get some writing done.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.